Hi, everybody. Welcome to Shooting the Breeze with Lady Liberty. I am Kate Fantanel, or Lady Liberty, and I'm so excited because I have two very special guests on my show tonight. It's a little bit different to my first two episodes, but different in a good way, hopefully. These two blokes are all the way from the greatest country in the world, the United States of America. I have Why are you laughing, Toad? I'll start with you. You are a very special guest. I met you in Boston, Massachusetts last year when I was visiting your country. We hung out, we went and saw a gig together, Alexis on Fire, and I had the best time in Boston doing the Freedom Trail. And you were so nice and took me out for dinner and a show. How are you, Toad?
That's true. That's true. I know how to date the ladies, man. Wine and dine them. Let's do it.
You did wine and dine. You took me to an Italian restaurant, and then I
Yeah,
took you to a hardcore show. That's like couple goals right there.
that's true.
That's peak masculinity.
Yeah, exactly. Dude, my favorite spot in Boston, man. It's Grotto. It's like a wine cellar, and like not too many people know about it. It's a hidden gem, right near the State House too, so you can yell at the government officials while you're there as well.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, most of my listeners are Australian. So Toad is an American. He has his own podcast, Tower Gang Toad, and he is running for the presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party of America. But we'll get to that later. My other special guest is from the Free State Project, which the Libertarian Party in the United States is running. New Hampshire. His name is Ben Weir, or the Emo ANCAP. I actually haven't met you yet, Ben, but I feel like I already know you. Welcome to my show. Thank you for getting up early, for joining me after your wild Halloween party last night.
It was wild. Let me tell you. The emos was all over the place at emo night last night, and we had a Darth Maul impersonator that I literally thought I was going to get chopped in half. It was crazy.
Darth Maul is the best. Darth Maul and obviously Padme is my favorite. I love Star Wars because I'm a nerdy libertarian, but I wanted to jump in with some serious stuff because my podcast so far has been about my favorite topic in the world, which is firearms and gun rights, both of which we don't really have in Australia. So I'm excited to have two Americans to talk about some of the stuff happening in my home state of Western Australia. So in my first two episodes, I talked about some of the plans that the government, which is the Labor Party, which is the equivalent of your Democrats, who are bringing in some outrageous laws here. They want to take my guns off me based on my views, opinions, and attitudes. Can I get a reaction from two Americans who have the Second Amendment? Can you imagine the government coming to your house and saying, you can't have guns anymore because you posted this on Facebook on this date criticizing the government. We don't trust that you are a responsible citizen. Hand us over your private property.
I can kind of imagine it happening in the U.S. because it seems like things are going that way, and the Second Amendment effectively does not exist. Like the Constitution it's been torn to shreds essentially. So different state governments here have different gun laws, though. So like I'm in Massachusetts, which probably has I think the worst out of any state.
Almost.
It's worse than California. I think worse than Hawaii. We have we had the during the 90s there was a federal assault weapon ban here, and I think that has expired. That in the U.S. I mean, and that has expired. But at the same point in time, Bill Weld, the OG libertarian, Bill Weld, he was the governor of Massachusetts. He instituted the same policy essentially in Massachusetts. That still exists. So there's been an assault weapon ban since then. And the current governor, while she was attorney general under the previous governor, Charlie Baker, who was the lockdown governor, now our governor is Maura Healey. When she was AG, she used some like loophole in like 2016 to further implement gun bans here to the point where it's basically you can't have any magazine a capacity over 7 in the state. So like effectively like everything is banned. Like you can't even own a Glock handgun if you're not law enforcement unless you like do something under the table, let's say. You could buy pieces of the Glock and piece it together.
This sounds like Australia's gun laws. We
And-
have restrictions
Exactly.
on magazines and caliber. So you're in Massachusetts. So it
And
is.
then if you go like an hour north, then you can just do whatever the fuck you want.
Right.
There's no we don't have to like enforce any federal gun laws in New Hampshire. In fact, it's Constitution carry, and you can own whatever the hell you want.
Yeah. Maybe I should just do that, man. Just for the ability to just walk around in like a store with a gun out.
Well,
Yeah.
when I was in America, it was so like fascinating to me to be in Walmart and see people open carrying there, and I actually felt safer. I felt like these people are responsible enough to look after their own safety. So if something happens, they're ready to go. Just going back a step. So the Second Amendment, Toad, you said it doesn't really apply. What do you mean by that? Because in Australia, we definitely don't have a Second Amendment. We've got a constitution. I've got my little constitution sitting here behind me. But we have no rights in that. Like Australians' constitution is not written from a perspective of individual rights. It's just a document about, traveling around the state, which we couldn't do during COVID anyway because they closed the borders. My state, we closed the border for 2.5 years. I couldn't leave this state for 2.5 years unless I got 3 injections, and I downloaded a government app and I documented everywhere I went, and they checked who I was hanging out with for contact tracing purposes. It was a real hard time. I'm getting a bit triggered talking about it, so we'll leave it there for that chat. But in terms of the Second Amendment, so wouldn't the Second Amendment trump state laws, though, or is it similar to here where the states are just doing whatever the hell they want now?
You would think it should. You think it would.
Well, yeah. So the U.S. I mean, we had some COVID restrictions, and those were more like state level as well. It was nowhere near as bad as what happened in Australia for sure. Even though I'm in one of the worst states for it, it was basically we just had like I was still extremely pissed off. Like we still had lockdowns and we had vaccine mandates for a little while, and they wound up getting thrown out. And I think that leads me to kind of saying that I think what the government is able to do also depends on what the population will put up with. So at least in the US, we do still have some semblance of like, yeah, this is the US. We have gun ownership. Like we'll only take like so much. Like this is still freedom, America, the freest country, even though it's not really, there is still some like thought of that's still around that I think is kind of saving us in a way. But the Constitution, I think it was a decent idea. Like the thoughts behind it were good. Originally, the founding fathers knew that they needed to restrict the power of the federal government, and that's what they wanted the Constitution to do. The original idea of it was to explicitly lay out like basically the only things that the federal government is allowed to do, and basically you're not allowed to do anything else. In the 10th Amendment, basically, well, this is more the Bill of Rights. That's the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. The 10th Amendment basically lays out that anything that is not explicitly laid out in the first 9 is then left to the states, so the states can kind of do what they want. So it's like a decentralizing document in a way. However, it replaced the Articles of Confederation, which was even more of a decentralized document, which was actually better than the Constitution. But the Constitution, the ideas are kind of still good and generally were to restrict the powers of the federal government. It's just that it also allows the federal government to interpret its own constitution. So you wind up in a situation where the federal government will just interpret it as loosely and as vaguely as possible and be like, oh, this is still constitutional. We'll just take away all your guns or whatever.
Yeah, they just take the vaguest overarching meaning of a word and they, basically it doesn't have to be as specific. And then like in the same breath, like, yeah, we have the Constitution, we have the Second Amendment. Well, we also have like really bad red flag laws in a lot of states, which basically just completely shred the Second Amendment. Obviously, that those don't exist in like New Hampshire, but in places like Florida, which is actually a red state, which supposedly they're supposed to, like love guns in Florida, and they're very like Republican and conservative leaning on that stuff. They have more red flag laws enacted every year than any other state. So, and they confiscate people's guns regularly. It's insane, right?
Yeah, it is a state by state thing, which is good in a way because you can move to a state like New Hampshire or whatever that has much looser gun laws. There are definitely a number of states, probably about, I would say about half the country probably has at least decent gun laws or lack of gun laws. Florida, I think, is probably a situation where they just can't enforce the gun laws that they have on the books because it is a like kind of a pro gun atmosphere there, a pro gun culture there. So I would imagine. I mean, I've been to Florida a few times in the last few years, but I've not lived there. But that's the vibe that I get, at least, especially like outside of the cities. It's like we have a bunch of fucking guns here, and I don't think the government's going to be able to do that much about it in Florida.
Well, you guys don't have registration as much as we did. So after 1996, every firearm in Australia has to be registered with a state government agency, which is run by the police. So the police department have control over the database. In my state of Western Australia, they gave that information to the newspaper who doxed us. They published a map on the front page, which you could see where all the firearms are stored. In other words, where we live, because our firearms are mostly stored in our home. Some people store them at the club, but most of us store them at their home. Not that we are allowed to use them for castle doctrine or self-defense. We have to keep them in a safe. The police can come and check on that safe at any times. We have to keep the ammunition and the magazines separate just in case. And we also have to prove that we have a legitimate reason for owning a firearm. We are not born with the inherent right to own a firearm in Australia. We have to prove to the government and the police why we want to use one. So some reasons include sports shooting, target shooting, hunting, primary production license, those kind of things. They are now talking about bringing restrictions on how many firearms you can own based on your purpose of use. So me as a competitive shooter, I'll only be allowed to own 10. And if you're a hunter, you're only allowed to own 5. Now, any hunter knows that 5 is not enough firearms for different game that you're shooting in Australia. We like kangaroos are a pest, so we control them with different firearms that we use to shoot buffalo or camel up north. So it's what I'm trying to explain to you here is that Australia has always had this, since 96 when we had our Port Arthur massacre incidents, which they used it as an excuse to come in with all these gun laws and basically confiscate firearms, put registration, put in all these laws, and now they're making it worse, is we're at this point now in my state of WA where they want to eradicate civilian ownership of firearms. That's the ideology that we're facing in Australia, and we don't have the Second Amendment or the right to bear arms. So as Americans listening to that, what would you say to Australians who love shooting, who love guns, who go out hunting because we want to protect our animals from pest animals that the British introduced? Like, this is actually a cultural thing as well, but the government has all the power. So I'm here screaming, saying, this is not good, guys. This is not good. I'm getting called radical and extreme. I don't really fit in here because I'm a bit different with my views. But I just want people to wake up and think it's not good when only the government, military, police have guns and citizens don't.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
Well, like, okay, so obviously Australia's gun laws are significantly worse than what we have here. But I will say, like, in terms of like registry and stuff like that, like there are certain states where it is pretty rough. I know Massachusetts, New York is one of them. I lived in California for like 3.5 years before I moved to New Hampshire. And that was like, as a gun owner, half of the stuff that I owned made me a felon. And in California, you're not even allowed to buy ammunition unless you have at least one registered gun with the state. So like, they have to know kind of what you have. But here's what's really fucked about it is that I can have like a 9mm handgun registered with the state, but like then they'll approve me to buy 5.56 ammo. Like there's nothing there. They do track how many bullets that you buy, which is another thing. Like they put it in their system and they know how much you're taking. So oftentimes, for me, I purchased one handgun in the state of California that basically put me in their system. But after that, like I would go to Nevada, I would drive 2 hours to buy ammo because like there's no restrictions over there. But also in California, you're not allowed to use lead ammo at all. At all. Like you can't have lead ammo because they said it was killing all the turkey vultures or something like that. So
What?
yeah, no, this is a real fact. So
Dude, we have a turkey infestation in Massachusetts, and we need to reduce the turkey population.
I agree. You guys have a lot of fucking turkeys down there.
I
But
hate it.
yeah, like they were saying like somebody shot a turkey buzzard or something, and then something else was eating the corpse of said turkey buzzard and it gave them lead poisoning. Like this is literally the logic they use to ban lead ammo.
They've just shut down. It's funny you bring that up. They've just shut down my pistol club in Perth where I shoot because they're concerned about the lead in the air. Now, the timing of it's quite interesting when they've just brought out this dog shit discussion paper, which reads like some Orwellian communist manifesto, which talks about opinions linked to your whether you can have a firearm or not. But they've started cracking down on rangers, saying they're policing lead levels. So it's funny that you bring that up. Toad, what do you think about this approach in Australia to firearms, where you have to prove that you have a right to even access one to begin with?
Obviously, I hate that. Obviously, I think that everybody has that right inherently to own whatever property they want, including guns. So, yeah, I think it's ridiculous. I think Americans have like a different view. Like they think a certain thing about Australia that's not actually true. Where Americans like we have like and we can talk about that mass shooting that happened near here if you want. We have a number of mass shootings that continue to happen, and I have thoughts on what actually is the cause of it. It's not the existence of guns. And people will always like try to bring up, well, Australia's completely banned guns. Australia doesn't have any guns and they don't have any mass shootings. That's what Americans like on the Democrat side or on the left, on the progressive side will say to try to justify like taking away guns here. And I'm like, but that's not actually true. Like they have guns in Australia still, even though their gun laws indeed suck horribly.
Yeah, I think your Vice President Kamala Harris, like our Prime Minister Albo, we call him Airbus Albo because, like, since he's been elected, he's hardly been in the country. He's like jet setting all over the place. I think he went to Ukraine and met with Zelensky and handed him a big novelty check. Like, he's just been jet setting all over the place. But I know he was in DC recently meeting with your leaders, inverted commas leaders, and she said something about, oh yeah, I've got it here. Australia leads the way. At a lunch for Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, Ms. Harris condemned a gunman who stormed a bowling alley in Maine, killing 18 people and wounding 13. Gun violence has terrorized and traumatized so many. It does not have to be this way, as our friends in Australia have demonstrated, Ms. Harris said. So they always said, like, I think we both kind of, not we as in us, but Australians and Americans misrepresent each other's culture and history of firearms, not intentionally, ignorance or just what they see on TV perhaps, but I'm an Australian. I grew up hunting and I grew up shooting with my dad. So obviously we have firearms in Australia. They're just heavily regulated. And my concern is the government is going too far now and they're about to wipe out the next generation of Australians from learning this important skill of hunting and being self-sustainable and even taking it up as a sport. They're even talking about not letting you own a gun in my state of WA based on physical appearance. Now that's like discriminatory. And they're also bringing in mental health stuff. So mental health is a whole other can of worms. And I know there was stuff about that in the Maine shooting. If you guys can just explain what happened there and your thoughts on it and how we can prevent mass shootings, $1 million question.
Sure. Like before I even dive into that, let me just say that like the blatant misreading of statistics when it comes to guns and gun deaths is insanity because like one, they don't take it on a per capita basis. So Australia's 13 times smaller than the United States. So we cannot use the same number saying, oh, there's less gun deaths in Australia than there is in America. Obviously, that's true. But two, there's like a crazy amount of studies out there that show you that the increase in gun laws and the more restrictive gun laws are does not mean that there's a lower murder rate, period.
Right.
Like the murder rate stays the same essentially, but reducing the amount of guns in people's hands has absolutely nothing to do with it. So,
Yeah.
obviously people are using Australia as an example, or even like places, in the UK that have really strict gun laws. But then you can look at places like Israel, and they have like 2% gun ownership, which is insanity to me. And now they're like fucked right now because like no one can defend themselves in any way. And obviously, in Gaza, they don't really have those type of gun laws. So like they're strapped to the teeth. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah.
People can actually defend themselves there, just not from drone missiles and shit. But
Yeah, which is also
obviously,
hilarious that like in at least here the like radical left like tends to be on the side of the Palestinians, but they're also like anti-gun. It's like, well, choose one.
Mm.
yeah, right. Or they're
You can't
gay,
be
and the
both, bro.
Palestinians would definitely hang them in the streets. But yeah,
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like what Kate was saying, I think there is definitely a reason why the government like they want to just have control over you. They don't want you to be self-sufficient. So part of that means they want to rob you of your ability to defend yourself and your ability to be self-sustainable, because then you're not going to be dependent on them and you're more difficult to control. And as far as the main situation, I think mental health plays a lot into it. What I was kind of alluding to a little while ago is I think the amount of mass shootings definitely has to do with the mental health situation, which I think there is a decrease. Like the mental health situation is like deteriorating, and I think a lot of that has to do with government as well. I think government is they're destroying families. They're enacting all these policies that just wreck people's families, wreck them economically. It's going to wreck their emotional state. So that has to do with it. What happened in Maine, essentially, and Ben can correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, was this guy. He had just his girlfriend had just dumped him, and he had just lost his job. So he was in this bad mental state. And I think initially he wanted to take that out on his girlfriend, and he went to first this bar where he knew his girlfriend frequented, or maybe they both did at some point. He showed up, she wasn't there, and I think he got increasingly angry, I guess, or just decided he was just gonna like he was just snapping basically, and he shot it up, and then he also shot up a bowling alley, because I guess he might have gone to both places trying to look for
yeah.
her, because I
I
guess
think he started at a bowling alley and then it went to the restaurant after that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I think those were both places that they would frequent, and he thought she was going to be at one of those places, and she was not. And he just shot them up anyway, and he wound up killing, I think, like 14 people and injuring 50 or so. And then
It was crazy. Yeah.
and then the media was trying to like build it up and like kind of stoke fear again, and of course they want to push that into more gun control, whatever. And it's like, be on the lookout for this guy, everybody's got to be like careful with this guy. I'm like, this guy's not going to be like in a population center at this point. Like, he's going to be like hiding in the woods. Like, I talked about this on
I knew he was going to kill himself too. Like,
yeah, so did my mom. My mom was like, he probably already committed suicide. I'm like, how do you know that?
Yeah.
But because, well, when we talked about it on, wait, I'm losing my mind. What show was? Oh, I was on Tyler Yonke's show on Friday, and we were talking about what if this guy like is doing what the Atlanta Olympic bomber did, where that guy went out. He was like an ex-military guy, and he had survival skills, and he knew how to survive in the woods, and that's what he did. He went out into the woods and he survived. He wasn't caught for like a long period of time. That was a whole crazy situation in the 90s or whatever. But this guy, I don't know if he had those survival skills, so that was probably unlikely that was the case. And they just found his body yesterday or Friday night, I guess. And what had happened was, I think immediately after the shooting, he like drove his car, got out of his car, walked off kind of towards the job that had fired him. I think he went over to that building, and they had these like trailers on the property, and went into one of the trailers and killed himself.
Mm.
yeah. And, like 100%, obviously, this is obviously a mental health issue. And this guy is like a former military guy who's actually a firearms instructor. And so he's like very skilled with a gun, first of all.
He is. Oh, that's right. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, I knew
And
that. Yeah.
two, like, he wasn't just like, I don't know, like I'm maybe looking into this a little bit further than most people would, but he wasn't using like a 223-556 AR. He was using a 308, which is like a much bigger round designed to kill people. So he had intent there for sure. But like in terms of like the mental health issue with that, like PTSD is a horrible problem with veterans and with law enforcement community. And there's really no treatment for that in America. They'll basically boost you full of SSRIs, which this guy was taking SSRIs, which are known to basically cause you crazy mental breakdowns and hallucinations.
What's SSRIs?
It's a serotonin like inhibitor. So basically, like it only lets certain things up into your brain to feel, but it also like will give you these like hallucinations. There's an insane amount of side effects. I was just talking to Liberty Dad DL Cummings the other day on a show, and he was saying like how they tried to give him SSRIs one time, and after he got out of the military, and he said some of the things he was thinking are just something that he would never think under a right mind at all. Like he's not even willing to share the things that went through his mind, because they literally will put insane thoughts in your head. So if this guy was dealing with severe PTSD and depression, and he was taking these SSRIs, like it really wouldn't take much to flip that switch to cause him to go crazy. And I think that that's probably the case with a lot of people that are taking these that end up going to, commit these shootings. Like we're not talking about giving them a real cure for their problem. We're basically keeping them sick and saying like, here, you can deal with these side effects instead.
Yeah. I think some of it is probably an effort to continue to prop up big pharma too.
Yeah.
Like, these guys come out of the military. Yeah, we're going to just pump them full of these drugs, and big pharma will get paid for it. And all that's doing is being in the military itself is going to destroy your mental health as well. And then you come out and then, let's further destroy it with these drugs. And yeah, these are not isolated situations either. Like I think there are a lot of cases where these guys come back from being deployed, like they're seeing like horrible things when they're out there, seeing the atrocities of war. They come back and then they wind up like committing like atrocities like at home, basically. Like I remember
themselves. Or like the veteran suicide rate's insane.
Yeah, it's disgusting. There is I can't remember the name of the movie. It's like The Gray something. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's this documentary about this guy who came back from being deployed in the Middle East somewhere. I think he came back, and the way they set it up, they like basically are saying like, we can't be sure like what actually happened here, but I am fairly confident that he killed his wife and kid and himself. It's a pretty brutal movie. It's like The Gray something. I can't remember the name of it.
So what are they talking about bringing in now in Maine after this incident? In terms of mental health, they're talking about bringing in mandatory annual mental health checks for every firearm owner in Western Australia to start, and then that will expand across Australia. Now, we already have a problem in terms of getting doctor's appointments here. We also have a mental health crisis after everything the government put us through during COVID with the lockdowns, et cetera, et cetera. I am kind of the view that people should look after each other. Like my shooting community and my shooting club, we look after each other. I would prefer to keep it in our community rather than having some quack sign off on whether we are able to have a gun or not. On the flip side of that, the medical community have already said we don't want to touch this, because if we sign someone off as okay to have a gun and then they go out and do what happened in Maine, then they're liable. So it's creating, I think it's deliberate. They're creating more and more hoops for us to jump through, and then every hoop is going to get harder and harder until it's just impossible to get a gun. So instead of actually coming outright and just saying we're going to ban civilian firearms ownership, we'll just make it so impossible and put so many roadblocks in the way that someone will just give up because it'll be that difficult to get one.
Yeah.
Like the overarching thing is obviously we keep saying like the decentralization of the gun laws, how it's mostly up to the states to decide those things. It does play into our favor a lot, but then like unfortunately for people like Toad in Massachusetts, you know, they're in a spot where they may get to that point, you know, with red flag laws where you have to prove your own sanity in order to own a gun. And that's basically like what red flag laws do all over the place. They can come into your house, take your guns, confiscate guns from the trunk of your car if they pull you over. And you know, if somebody calls in and says that like they think that you're crazy, it could be an X. They could have no substantial proof that you have any kind of deficiencies whatsoever or anger issues or anything. They don't have to have proof. Someone just has to call and make that call, and then you have to prove your sanity in order to get your guns back.
Yeah, and it leads to situations like I don't know if it was specifically a red flag law, but like the Duncan Lemp tragedy in Maryland. I don't know if the Australians are familiar with that case, but that was a case where I believe like he was a young guy who was a gun owner, and I believe one of his neighbors, I mean, had like called the cops on him just because of his gun ownership, which may or may not have been technically not legal ownership of firearms. The cops basically like showed up and just like shot up his parents' house. So like he was not even the only one living there. It was his parents were there, and he was in bed with his girlfriend, fiance, I guess, and she was pregnant at the time, and they like shot his bedroom up and killed him and like flashbanged it. And she was there like when that all went down too, and she survived. Like, yeah, he was killed and he was about to become a father and whatever. So you get situations like that caused by these ridiculous gun enforcement.
That's the other thing that I'm a bit concerned about. And I had it on my show last week, an elected politician here from the Legalised Cannabis Party. Yes, we have a political party in Australia that wants to legalize cannabis. It's only legalized for medicinal use here. You need a prescription from a doctor, and there are no shops. It gets posted to your house, or you go to Australia Post Office to pick it up. He was on my show last week, and he said he had a run-in with a cop, and it was quite aggressive. So that's the other thing that I'm worried about, is this culture of, we used to have a culture of like the UK system of policing where they were the bobby, they would help you. If you were lost in the street, you could ask a policeman and they would help you. Now there is no way I would be asking a cop for help. So we're actually changing the culture in Australia, where it's become more of a police state rather than they're there to protect us. And I know that's something that you guys have experienced a little bit in America with your policing.
Something I'd be curious about, like in Australia, like here in America, cops actually have no obligation to actually protect you or save you in any way. They can basically stand by the wayside if they think that their own safety is. But in Australia, like, are they obligated to try to do something? Because I feel like it's probably not the case there either.
Probably not. That's probably just what we're told. But we're told, if in an emergency, don't do anything, run away and call a policeman. We are told not to. We're not meant to carry things for self-defense. In my state, you can carry pepper spray, but it's a gray area when it comes to using it. So you could be prosecuted for using pepper spray against a rapist in my state of WA, because the solution is call the cops. Now, as a self-reliant individual, to me, that's horrifying. And I don't like this culture that we're getting in Australia, where we have to turn to the government or the policeman or the politician to save us. But that is what's happening in my country.
And the response time is going to be horrible. Like, you're going to be dead before the cops show up. So like, what good is that? They can just show up and very slowly and ineptly investigate your death. That's the situation they want. No, the ideal situation is that you have the ability to defend yourself however you see fit. Maybe you're defending yourself. Maybe you'd be able to hire like private individuals to be like your security or whatever the case might be. Like, those should be the ideal options, I was saying. I think what Ben was talking about is something that stems, I think, from Warren versus DC or whatever it was, or DC versus Warren. That it was a case that went to the Supreme Court that wound up resulting in what's the word I'm looking for? The decision wound up being that the cops have no obligation to protect you. Essentially, was the decision, and that was this like horrific case where these women who I think were college women in like a I don't know if it was off campus housing maybe in like the DC area. They were attacked by some guy or something. And he killed. I don't know the whole story, the specifics of it anymore, but he killed like at least one of them. One of them called the cops, and I think the cops were like there. They like showed up and they didn't even do anything.
Right.
So
Well,
then
then like you look at things like
Yeah.
the shooting even just in Texas that just happened, and it was at a school, and the cops were lining the hallways, basically strapped to the teeth in full battle rattle, like bulletproof vests, the whole nine, right? And like they were just standing in the hallway while kids were getting shot. You had parents standing outside
Yeah.
trying to break in with their guns so that they could do something because they were pissed because the cops weren't doing shit. And then you have like, videos where like, from the surveillance cameras where the cops are literally just like sitting around, someone's messing around on their phone while this shit's going down. Like it's insane.
And it was a single shooter, and you had a whole force of cops, and they're not even going to go in and try to help out in this situation. They actually prevented parents from going in too. They were like physically restraining parents who were like, "You're not going to do anything. Fuck you. I'm going in."
That's the other thing I try and talk to about Australians is self-defense. So we don't have a right to self-defense. Like I said before, we don't have castle doctrine. If someone breaks into my house right now, I'm meant to pick up my phone and call the cops, or equal force. If they punch me, I'm allowed to punch them. But obviously, if a big guy's punching me, it's not going to be equal force. But I'm not allowed to use my firearm to defend myself. So the Australian governments have created a nation of victims where we have been brainwashed into being reliant on the state to protect us instead of us protecting ourselves. Now, I grew up in a family where I was told, be responsible for yourself, be responsible for your safety and those around you that you love. So that's what I embody. And it's very hard living in a country where that's not the culture, especially in the cities. People they want to be reliant on someone else for everything. So we've created people, a whole new generation of Australians who are just going to turn to the government every time something goes wrong. And it's not right. That's why I love America, because you guys are the land of the brave and home of the free. I always stuff that up, but you have that as part of your people and your culture. And that's what I love about your country. And I'm just trying to educate Australians to, the government should never be the first solution to any problem, including war. I feel like that's why we're in this situation with Israel now. Toad, you have been tweeting some really base stuff in relation to what's going on in Israel and Palestine. What's your opinion on what's going on in Gaza?
My opinion is that the state of Israel is really just a proxy state of the U.S. empire at this point for geopolitical reasons. The U.S. just want to have that state that is basically a puppet of theirs or under their control in that geographic region for those reasons. And I think that what's going on with Gaza and with the Palestinians is that Israel has basically set up an apartheid state there, and the Palestinians are being treated much worse than the Israeli population. Gaza has essentially been like a prison camp, essentially like an internment camp. So I think that I'm not trying to justify like any violence against innocent people in either direction, even though people will try to say that if you're anti-Israel or you're pro-Islamic terrorism, you're pro-Hamas or whatever the case might be. That's like the U.S. propaganda that they're pumping out there to try to get you to support this war. And it's just like the aftermath of 9/11. That's exactly what they were saying as well then. Oh, you're supporting Islamic terrorists then if you don't want us to be doing something over there militarily. Well, no, like the situation is awful, and it's been provoked by the U.S. military presence over there and by what Israel has been doing to the Palestinians and their treatment of them. This is like blowback, essentially, similar to what 9/11 was.
Well, that would be interesting for Australians to hear, because in Australia, we're hearing, the US is getting ready to help Israel, and we've got Australian politicians coming out in support of Israel, but in the streets we've got the Palestinians marching, like in Perth CBD, yes, every Saturday, and in Sydney you heard them saying at the Sydney Opera House, gas the Jews. So in my country of Australia, we're seeing this division play out in the street, and it actually makes me really anxious because as a libertarian, I don't want people to kill each other, and it's the government that is creating this problem. It's a failure of diplomacy, and I'm with James Babbs from PRL on this. The no state solution, get government out of the way and let citizens live in peace. Ben, what do you think?
Listen, I am an anarchist to my core, so I believe in a no state solution 100%. But I also think in this situation, at least so we can progress in some kind of peaceful direction, there should be at least a two-state solution, which has never existed. There's they've tried, I guess, in the past multiple times to make this a thing. I know Bill Clinton tried to facilitate this at one point, and I think maybe Obama did. I don't remember for sure, but like it's never been anything that was really taken seriously at all. And in fact, our interventionism over there and our constant aid that we're sending over there with money and stuff every single year, we've been playing both sides of the fence. Didn't we just send like $300 million to Palestine for gender studies? Like legitimately as part of one of the COVID relief packages.
So it's something like that.
Yeah, it's insanity. But so we're playing both sides of every war. We really have been for over 50 years. No, like no state solution. Sure, this is like perfect anarcho-capitalism dreamland. I'm not a pipe dreamer, but there's never been any serious effort to create a two-state solution. And right now, they're trying to create a one-state solution on either side. They're saying either one side can exist and the other can't. And obviously, that is not a way to create peace at all. These people will not be able to coexist under one inside of one set of borders. It's just not going to happen. We're talking about like an ideology that's over 2,000 years deep and ingrained into them. And we're talking about like the wars that have happened over the last all of these years, where people's kids have been dying regularly. And then their brothers and sisters are growing up angry, wanting to seek revenge. Like there's no way to fix this.
It's kind of like really the solution to like every similar problem is to decentralize in some way, and that's what you need. You need these people to be separated, and then they can exist. They can live how they want, and they need to be allowed to defend themselves. That's kind of what I would say would be the solution there. Other than you saying that there's a no states, the no state solution would be ideal, but like, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything that Ben said. So.
What's the mood like in the US? Are you guys getting ready to ramp up military involvement there? Is that what you're saying in the news? I know Australia is just throwing money that we don't have. We've gone over $1 trillion in debt. No one seems to care about that. Inflation is through the roof. People can't put food on the table. Electricity prices are through the roof, but we're giving all this money to overseas conflicts, including Ukraine. What's happening in the US? What are you guys doing? What's your government doing?
I thought I saw like an article the other day that we are getting ready to deploy troops over there this week or something like that. Obviously, they're like consistently shipping money over there. This has been a constant thing. They're talking about like what is like $100 billion or something to split between Ukraine and Israel right now, which is asinine. That's what Congress and the White House is trying to push, is like, a combined bill to send money to both. But yeah, like they're definitely trying to send troops over there, and they have been. I heard that some like special forces crews are already there. So it's, I don't know, like it's crazy.
What do you feel about having troops on the ground in the Middle East again in 2023?
They haven't left.
They're already there.
They're already there.
We're still like, people think just because we left Afghanistan that we like withdrew everyone. Thanks, Joe Biden. No, that's not true. Like we still at war with 6 countries over there. We still have a very heavy military presence in the Middle East that people just seem to forget about because Ukraine took over the main news cycle is essentially what happened. But they're like, okay, yeah, we drew from Afghanistan, but like, we're still in, Iraq, Pakistan, we're in
Syria.
Somalia, like Niger, like,
yeah,
it's insane.
And Trump was like kind of saying that he was going to pull the military out of Syria, which he should have, and then it was like, oh, but the Kurds need our protection, and then he just like all he did was like shuffle troops around and like move them slightly within Syria.
Yeah.
It's all so ridiculous.
So what would you guys want to see happen with America's involvement in these conflicts as libertarians or as peaceful people?
End the involvement, get out.
And then what? Because it's kind of portrayed, especially over here, that it's the United States' responsibility to solve all these problems.
The U.S. created the problems. Yeah, the U.S. created them in the first place for the most part. So, like the only way to really solve it is to get uninvolved, and then I mean, there are going to be some bad times if that happens, but it's not something that the U.S. should be involved in at all.
Almost every single war that we're involved in over there is because of U.S. interventionism, and it's all just backblast because of it, like from the last 50 years. So backblast.
I like that better than blowback. It sounds more gay.
Backblast.
Backblast.
Blowback. Yeah.
Stop being nasty on my show, guys. Say it after.
It's only gay if you make eye contact.
I'll save it for the DMs.
No, so the blowback, yes, that's the one. But truthfully, just because you are an anti-interventionist doesn't mean you're an isolationist. You can still have allies and friends, and I mean, I would assume that even if we're not there physically intervening, but it's just not possible. We're in over 100 countries. We have a military presence. We need to scale all of that back, and we need to bring all of that back to ourselves. It doesn't mean we can't have friends, and we can't maybe have some people around the globe that I don't know. I guess the United States would probably still do surveillance. Like I said, I'm an anarchist. I don't want any of this shit to exist. But the reality is, if we can just scale it back just a little bit, man, that's a little bit at a time. That's all you got to do is how do you eat an elephant? It's just one bite at a time. You know what I mean? So that's just the truth of the matter. So if we can just keep scaling back the Middle East involvement, pull back from each country one at a time. Dude, I don't even know how this is going to happen. We're we're in so deep with these politicians, and there's so many backdoor deals that happen, especially with Ukraine and Zelensky. There's no way they're going to allow us to ever withdraw from that region ever. So
the only one that profits is the industrial military war complex. That's pretty much what it comes down to. And people that suffer on the streets, that's where my heart goes when I think about this. And you're right, it doesn't mean that we're anti, we just want people to live in peace. And governments seem to be making the situation worse.
Yeah. No, trading with other countries is good. We need to end the military presence there. And I think the state that we're in is basically I think, it's all to prop up the military industrial complex, and the people in power are basically trying to decide what war can we have that's going to get the most buy-in from the people. I think that's what's going on here. So it was we can't really continue this Afghanistan thing anymore. We're going to shift it to Ukraine. Let's see how that pans out. And then, there's not going to be enough buy-in to the Ukraine war anymore, leading up to the 2024 election. We need something here. Let's shift it to Israel. And the thing about the Israel situation is that actually is going to destroy the right wing in the U.S. had gone in a pretty anti-war direction recently because the Democrats who are in power were kind of pushing all these wars that they couldn't get buy-in from the right on, essentially. But now Israel is the right's like baby, basically, essentially. Yeah. They're like conditioned to like love Israel. Israel is our greatest friend and ally, whatever. So that's going to benefit the U.S. like war regime, I think, immensely in that way. We're not only like they're going to get a war where they're going to get like a lot of people kind of on both sides to buy in, and basically the only people that are not buying into it are on the fringes on both sides, kind of, which are like the extreme left who are like pro Hamas essentially, and then and then like us, basically like right wing libertarians are also against this war, and that's basically it.
Well, talking of right-wing libertarians, tell me, Toad, about your run for presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party. Now, going back a step, your system of politics is very different to Australia's. So in terms of selecting a candidate for your party, now I met Spike Cohen when he was in Australia, Sydney this year, and he is a legend, and his wife, Tara, I call her Tara, but you guys pronounce Tara differently. His wife.
Well, it depends. We have both. Both are names.
Oh wow, there you
go.
And
they're spelled the same way, so you never know how it's pronounced.
I met him, and he's a legend. He was the VP when Joe was
Jorgensen, Sleepy Joe.
Oh no!
Yeah. She's our own Sleepy Joe. Yeah.
Well, you said it with such affection.
She's so boring.
And Ben, because you're part of the emo caucus of the Libertarian Party, now we're not going to spurg out too much over libertarian politics, but I did want to know, Toad, on what platform are you running as a presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party? Give us your elevator pitch, or have you not come up with one yet?
No, I do. I tweeted it out. We'll have to see if I can remember it like off the cuff. Although I have on like multiple shows, but it's been a while. And I will just say, like in the U.S., quickly, like the system of politics is pretty much a duopoly, and you wind up just getting the same thing regardless of which party is in power. So we're the same. Yeah, between the Republicans and the Democrats, I think there's definitely an argument to be had that Trump was a Trump was somewhat different from that. He was a little bit of a separation from it, not as much as it should have been, not anywhere near as much as he should have been, but like slightly. But we have the Libertarian Party, which is the third biggest party, but still has no ability to win, no power whatsoever. And I think essentially it only is going to serve as like a messaging vehicle, just to the extent that you can get that message out on like social media, because the two-party system doesn't want like the Libertarian Party to even be like in the limelight at all. And when they do, it's like, oh, we'll have Gary Johnson on and like trap him with questions about Aleppo or whatever and make him look like an idiot. So that's basically the extent of what like the corporate media wants to do as far as like putting the Libertarian Party in the limelight. As far as what my run is about, is that when I said that yes, I will run, there was nobody running at the time that I thought at all represented what we set out to do with the Mises Caucus, if you want to still call us that. I don't know if the Mises Caucus doesn't even support me, so I don't know. There's been a fracturing in the party, but we had this like the Ron Paul revolution, like 2.0, basically, and we went to Reno in 2022, and our guys like took the majority of the party and kind of took it over. Although, like I said, we've kind of like fractured since then, but I was looking at like Chase Oliver and Mike Termott, and I'm like, these guys don't represent like Ron Paul-esque libertarianism, just like pure libertarianism, essentially, just libertarianism. So I'm going to run. I'm going to be the guy that represents that. Now, Josh Smith has entered, and I think he represents that very well as well. So I think it is essentially the two of us at this point, even though the Mises Caucus is backing Michael Rechtenwald, who I think he's fine. I think he is boring. I think he's Sleepy Mike, basically. Yeah, like I don't disagree with him on very many positions, but yeah, he doesn't excite me. I don't get a boner like I do when I see Josh Smith or myself in the mirror. But my platform, I think, is the most based platform out of anybody's, and my platform is intended to be like just really kind of based almost like meme like bullet points, where number one is to be the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, which is meme the bad guys until they cry. Like we want to do what Libertarian, what LPNH did, like to Meghan McCain on Twitter, like happy holidays when John McCain dies. No shedding of tears for any of the warmongers out there. Like just blast them on social media as much as possible. They deserve zero sympathy. Yeah, so meme the bad guys until they cry. That's number one. So use social media in that way and just be extremely bold about it and not give a shit like who you're upsetting. Upset the bad guys. Number two, I don't remember which order these are all in. One of my platforms is definitely the anti-war plank, which is essentially, I called it Cry Me a River. Which Ben like because it plays into all of these play into the emo caucus because I'm running for the emo caucus. Meme them until they cry. Cry Me a River was basically get the U.S. Military out of Ukraine, but now that's going to have to shift to, I don't know, tear gas Israel or something. Make just
for what they're doing to the Palestinians.
Well, make the people that are in support of these wars cry essentially by ending the U.S. involvement there. Like, I'm sorry, like. This is the best course of action. We have to bring all the troops home, end the U.S. military presence in all of these foreign countries, end foreign aid. That's number two, or whatever number I put it at. One of the other ones, we'll call it number three, was make January 6th the national holiday. Which is wrapped into this is actually the one important thing in that is that the treatment of the January 6ers has been awful and nobody is really talking about it enough. A bunch of those guys are in prison for essentially entering a building. This is ridiculous, and all of them should be pardoned or whatever the mechanism should be. They should all be freed. They did not do anything wrong, and they were pointing out some. I refer to them as patriots. They're pointing out like actual problems, and they were focused on the right bad guy in this situation, which is Congress, the halls of Congress, and the federal government. These guys, they have like legitimate beefs. A lot of it was over the COVID lockdown stuff. Let the January 6ers out, free them. That's number three. I had five. What were the other two, Ben? Do you even remember?
I mean, I think the most important ones were covered, which was Cry Me a River, Tear Gas Israel. And
all five were important, man. One was about the public education system and ending public education, but it was also wrapped into it was promoting the listening of emo music over
that's it.
Over transing the children. Like,
yes.
Just cut your wrists, man. Don't cut your dick off.
Yeah.
But no, I want to go back to like my upbringing, man. Like if you're like a depressed like teenager, you're confused, whatever, the answer is not to like make permanent changes to your sex and like ruin your ability to have children, reproduce, and probably ruin your life. It's going to ruin your mental state. It's going to make you more likely to commit suicide, whatever. No, just everybody has these problems, man. Just listen to emo music, listen to me. Like, we'll help you guys out.
Punch dance your rage out.
Yeah. That's one of them. There was one more. Damn it. I'm completely forgetting it now.
You've got to know your stuff, Ted. If you want to be a political candidate, you have to be able to get that pitch. Come on, you got to practice. I know it's early morning there. You're so sweet getting up early to be on my little show. One thing that I do need to clear up, we're approaching the hour now. Can you please explain to my Australians listening, what is a libertarian? Ben, you go first. How would you describe libertarian?
My God, I'm going to have everyone hate me over this answer because no one can agree on what a libertarian is. It comes down to like the really simple terms, which is kind of a cliche in the Libertarian Party at this point, but don't hurt people, don't take their stuff. This like the non-aggression principle. That is like the fundamental value of libertarians is like, you own yourself, you own the right to your body, you're allowed to own property and to protect your property. And outside of like, in ultimately, in terms of regulating and rules and stuff like this, there's nobody that knows how to run your life and do that more than yourself. And if you it's like, so we want to basically scale back the government and create a society where it's voluntary and where people respect the individual. again, and that's kind of, my pitch for libertarianism. It's all about individualism, individuality. There's still like a community, obviously, aspect to it, but
Yeah.
it has to stem from respecting the individual first and your individual rights. And even when somebody disagrees with you, you should still be able to respect how they're living their life and how they're regulating their bodies and all this stuff. So
Yeah, so I agree with Ben on all that, and I would say that I think kind of the main like issue amongst people that consider themselves to be libertarians is that they kind of they misinterpret or they don't like where that actually like leads, and especially what they don't like, the ones that tend to be more on the left don't like the fact that you would still have like voluntary hierarchies because people are still individuals. Everybody's still different. Like these people want to push for like equality or egalitarianism. And I think that's the main difference, that like respecting individuality comes with also respecting that everybody is individually different, but also that people are going to be better at certain things than other people. And when you allow them to like do everything voluntarily, you're going to wind up in a better situation where you have people that are kind of fitting into what role they would serve more like naturally, and you like fitting into some position where they're using their skill set in a better way and more naturally. So that's what I would say about that. You would still have like rules and hierarchy. It's just nobody should have the right to enact that with force against you. It should all be voluntary. And the plank that I was forgetting is one of my most important ones, Ben, and it's an awesome one. It is governors to Gitmo.
that's the one.
So we
Yes.
can't forget about the COVID tyrants, and they should have to pay for what they did. So it is. I'm not even being ironic about this. The governors who implemented the lockdowns, the federal government officials, Fauci, whatever, they need to suffer legal consequences for this. My approach would be to leave Gitmo open, but use it to throw them all in there.
And Gitmo is a prison?
And just torture them with thrash metal for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and they should be forced to listen to Screamo 24/7. That should be their sentence for life. Dude, these people really don't deserve to be like out. They don't deserve to be amongst like the population.
I've got a couple of Australian premiers we can throw in there too that need to be held accountable for what they did to the people here.
Yeah,
they can listen to a lot of Alexis on Fire.
Yeah, exactly. These were the worst crimes against humanity perpetrated in our lives, and these people are going to suffer no consequences for it because they're still in power right now. A bunch of these governors are still governors right now. Gretchen Whitmer got like reelected. You have all like these people have to face consequences for this. You can't do this to the people.
Man. Well, on that note, vote Toad for president. I can't wait to get my little baseball cap. I really want to come over there and go door knocking with you. Vote one, Toad. Thank you so much for joining me on Shooting the Breeze with Lady Liberty. I had Ben Weir, the emo ANCAP. You can find him on Twitter, and Toad, Tower Gang Toad. Yeah. Thanks again, gentlemen. I love your beautiful country. If you guys ever have like a political refugee program, I'm signing up. I need to escape the tyranny of Australia to your beautiful country. So hopefully I'll get over there next year for your Liberty festivals, hopefully on a one-way ticket, but time will tell. Thank you for listening to my show, and I will see you all next week. Bye.
Thank you. Peace.
Thanks.